Good afternoon. This is Shawn Turner with Turner Flowers. Our topic today is tropical indoor plants. So one of the few things that we're able to do right now, since flower shops are on the non-essential list with the state, but funeral services are on the essential list, as we're able to provide flowers and plants for memorial services. And it was weird, but our shop was out of plants, and so I headed up to our local greenhouse that grows for us here in the last couple days and picked up a shipment of plants, and want to talk to you all about processing those and how to care for them in your own home. So when we get the plants from the grower, they come in sleeves, and in the winter time these sleeves protect the cold when the grower delivers them. Usually we get a big shipment, and so they deliver them. I just needed a few, so I ran up to the greenhouse and got them myself. They come in these sleeves that protect them from the weather. Now, it's not below freezing right now, but we still like them in those sleeves, because that way when they're riding in the truck, they're protected, not hurting each other, that sort of thing. So how do we get them out of these sleeves? We have a tool that my dad built probably 40 years ago that is a disc blade and a piece of bar stock and a steel disc on it. And so you take that de-sleever, you set him right on there, the sleeve slides right off, and you're ready to work with your plant. Now, if I was sending these plants back out and they weren't going to be dressed with a basket and a bow, if it was just to take to my own greenhouse or somewhere, you can go in reverse, and you've got a sleeve, just that easy again. So some of these plants you're going to recognize from FFA and 4-H floriculture lists. Some of them you won't. This one you'll recognize is Spathiphyllum, a peace lily. And as we process these, I want to water them, and I want them to soak for a little while. And so that's the first thing I'm going to do is fill that up. And rule of thumb with watering is you want to make sure that you saturate the soil all the way top to bottom, and then wait until it's dry top to bottom. One thing that folks don't think about with plants is it's just as important for roots to have air as it is for them to have water. So they need to have water half the time. They also need to have air half the time. And so I really like to see that full cycle of all the way saturated to all the way dry. You always hear people talking about they picked up an orchid, and the instructions on the orchid plant said to place an ice cube on the top of the soil once a week and it would just melt a little bit. But if you think about where orchids come from, they're holding onto the trees. They're epiphytes hanging onto tree bark in the middle of the Central American and South American rainforest. What sloth or monkey is going to be carrying around a bucket of ice cubes to put on all of those orchids? It's not going to happen. So what orchids are looking for is moisture that comes from the air in the form of humidity. So they like to have a spritzer bottle that you would spray all of the foliage down a couple times a week, and then that you would soak the roots and the bark for about 15-20 minutes in water, once a week, once every week and a half, and then just drain it and let them dry again. Don't let them stand in water, because there wouldn't be standing water up in the trees in the rainforest. So with peace lilies, they're pretty forgiving, but I've got him here in some water, and I'm going to let him soak 15 or 20 minutes before I go to drain him. I've got a Neanthobella parlor palm. So this is one of my favorite kinds of plants. When it blooms, it actually gets a little stem that has lots of tiny yellow balls on it. Doesn't really get a bloom, just lots and lots of little yellow balls. So again, we're going to fill up this pot all the way, make sure that the pot is full and that there's water that's come out the bottom. I want to saturate that soil completely. And the way to think about saturating the soil completely to feed the plant, let's say you've got your little brother in the back of the car and he's hungry. And so you stop at Sonic and you get a kid's meal with some tater tots. And if you were just going to be one of those people that waters their plants a little bit every day, you'd be the person that would grab a tater tot, hand it back to your little brother and say, "Let me know when you're hungry again." And you know that that one tater tot's not going to fill him up. Just like putting a little third or half a cup of water in a large plant is not going to fill him up. You're going to hand him the whole kid's meal, all the tater tots, have him eat, and hope that it's several hours before he's hungry again. In our case, we're going to go ahead and fill this pot up with water, saturate the soil top to bottom where all the roots are, And then we're going to wait until it's time again to water him, which depends on your temperature, your light, your humidity, your airflow, lots of different factors inside your house or outside. With these tropical plants, you can't give them too much light inside. The light transmittance inside of your house on the brightest sunny day is going to be like 10% or less inside the house of what it is outside. And so you never really have to worry about giving a plant too much light inside the house. Now, if I want to take these tropical plants outside, it's a whole different ball game. I want to keep them on the north or the east side of the house because they can handle a little bit of morning sun. But especially here in Kansas, the south and west afternoon, and especially in the summer, that afternoon sun on the south and the west is just too intense, and it's going to cook these tropical plants, burn them to a crisp, and leave you nothing but a pot of sadness. And so make sure that if you do decide to take your tropical plants outside, that you leave them on the north or the east side of the house where they're getting indirect light or just a little bit of morning sun and not going to get absolutely fried. Our next plant is an Arboricola scheffalera. Some people call this an octopus plant or a chef. Lots of different names and things that you can call them. Notice the leaf pattern, that all the leaves come from that central hub. Everything branches out from that one central point. They are probably not my favorite plant. It's kind of a cool plant. You get a lot of these leaves that shed off the bottom. I'm going to get these dry leaves out of the bottom. Whenever you're working with tropical plants or really any plants like that, this dead foliage is important to get out of the way because any rotting or old foliage like that emits ethylene gas, and you really don't want high levels of ethylene around your plants, especially if they're blooming plants, because ethylene causes floral abscission, which basically means that the flowers fall off and die, and then you're again left with nothing but a pot of sadness. So again, we're going to give him a good drink. He is a little big for this pot, and so somebody's going to need to transplant him before too long. These are 6-inch pots that I've shown you so far, 6-inch diameter across the top of the pot. That's kind of one of the more standard sizes of plants. And when we go up from a 6-inch, we go up to an 8. This is an 8-inch peace lily, 8-inch diameter pot, big grower pot there, and so that's definitely for a larger plant. It takes a little bit more water, more soil. As you can see, he's real thirsty there. We'll let him soak that up for a bit. So as far as care on these plants, everybody says, how often do you fertilize? What do I do? Am I going to kill it? What's going to happen to these blooms? So a peace lily is going to bloom for several weeks, if not a couple of months. And then when it decides the time is right, it's going to bloom again. And in some households, that's going to be every couple, 3 months. In a lot of households, that's going to be a once-a-year occasion. But when those dry up, you can snip them off. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just natural for the blooms to only last about that long. What we wanted to look at is the foliage and keeping it nice so the plant can bloom again. And so I recommend a soluble fertilizer that something like Miracle Grow. Miracle Grow hasn't paid me to use their name, but it's a very common name that people are used to using. Something that's a uniform blend, 18-18-18, 20-20-20, where your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are all fairly uniform. If you're wanting to slow your growth but still have some nice dark lush green foliage, a lot of growers are going to tell you to drop that middle number in half. Do a 20-10-20 or something like that. Go a lower phosphorus to keep from having as much upward and extended growth. That's just going to do a lot of low healthy growth, and then the nitrogen is going to give you a lot of nice lush dark green foliage. And depending on your household, I would do that every 6 to 8 weeks. More often if you feel like you're watering more often because it's in a hotter atmosphere. Every time that it dries up and you water, those nutrients are getting flushed through, and so the more often you have to water, the more often you should be fertilizing. If you've got this in the house and you start to notice brown tips on your tropical plant, that is a very strong indication of overwatering. And so if your plants that you have in your house have come in a big pot that doesn't have a lot of drainage, or it's come in a basket that has a liner, you want to make sure when you water those that you let them soak everything up that they can for an hour or less. Dump the excess water out. These plants like to drink. They don't like to swim. And so make sure that that extra water doesn't stand in there, because then that extra water that's standing in the bottom of your plant is also going to create damage. It's going to yellow leaves. It's going to put brown tips on the end of your leaves. We want to avoid that as much as we possibly can. Another plant that we got in today is a lemon lime dracaena. This is known as a Warnicki. It's in the corn plant family. Two-tone corn plant. Again, if it gets brown tips on the leaves, you're overwatering. This is a caning style plant, and so it's going to keep getting taller and taller and have this same plume on top. So you'll end up with a stalk and then this big plume of foliage up on the top. So really good for a corner of a room, some room that has tall ceilings, somewhere that you need upward growth but not outward growth. A lot of us have seen a peace lily that has just kind of gotten out of hand. You can easily have one of those that's 4 feet across and it takes up the whole living room. And so if you're really not wanting that width, something like a corn plant would be a perfect choice. That corn plant also comes in a solid dark green variety. This is known as a Janet Craig. That's the cultivar is Janet Craig. Again, it's a corn plant dracaena, very easy care. Corn plants tend to like less water, so you can keep them on the dry side and they will thank you for that. Let's see if we've got any others here today. Absolutely. You will recognize this off of your list as a golden pothos. Some people are going to call it a philodendron. It's technically not a philodendron. It is a cousin of a philodendron, but it's one of the more common names that people know a golden pothos by. Another name that it goes by would be a devil's ivy. You'll notice this one has got a wooden post in it. These branches and vines have been gently stapled to that wood post so that it can be trained upward rather than vining all over the living room. Do not be afraid to give these a haircut. Any of the stems that you cut off are going to have an adventitious root on here that you can stick that in a glass of water for a few days, then stick it down in some moist soil, and you're going to have another plant really, really soon. Very easy to propagate, very easy to care for, a little bit more forgiving if you tend to be a wet grower and are a little bit too heavy with the watering can. It's going to be a lot more forgiving than, say, a dracaena. The dracaenas really do like to stay more on the dry side. So 6-inch plants, 8-inch plants, we deal a little bit in 10-inch pots as well. Those suckers are huge, so 6s and 8s tend to be the more popular way. How do we use them in the flower shop? Generally they're going to be put in a nice basket, have a nice bow put on them. We're going to get to a bow tying video here soon. But a lot of times they'll be used as a gift, birthdays, anniversaries, memorial services, anything like that. We do have water picks that we can put fresh flowers in them to give them some color. Some folks like silk flowers or wheat or American flags and things stuck in them. We also have some oblong baskets that we can put a plant in one side and a floral arrangement in the other, and that way they have some color and a really nice bright colorful gift for now, and a plant that the recipient can keep for later, and that makes a really cool gift. So that's the skinny on tropical plants. If you have some follow-up questions, don't hesitate to give me an email. It's Shawn at turnerflowers.com. That's SHAWN at turnerflowers.com. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.